Well, hello once again. My name is Warren Fryer, and I'm sitting here with Dr. William Waite. We're coming to you from Bangkok, Thailand, on our Life Streams Thailand YouTube channel. Today, we're starting what I hope is going to be a fascinating, wonderful series looking at this idea of quadrants, giving an overview of the quadrants as we talk about live streams, and focusing on two of them in particular. But so before I get ahead of myself and ahead of William, I'm going to let William give you kind of the thumbnail sketch and outline what we mean when we say quadrants.
Yeah, well, we say both quadrants or streams, so that's part of where life streams comes through. We have four different ways of taking in information and experience. Firstly, we have the experience, the bodily experience. We have the sensorium of the physical body. Uh, we also have, on top of that, our emotionality or our emotions, our feeling states. We also, on top of that, have thought processes or thinking. And then we have another thing which is a little more ethereal, we could call intuition. So those four quadrants or those four streams are basically the way that we learn both about ourselves internally and the outside world, the way that we relate to the outside world.
And so today we're going to come in from that overview and zoom in a little closer on the emotional states and the thought process, or the head and heart. Which, when I say those two words, all of a sudden, a bunch of people, I felt them, sigh in relief. Oh, head and heart. Okay, I got what you're talking about. So it's not random, the fact that we've chosen to open up the series through the quadrants with looking at head and heart, because it seems to me, from what I understand, that most people tend to kind of congregate under one of those flags. Like, someone considers themselves a rational person, or I don't know how many people consider themselves to be emotional people, but a lot of people get labeled that way. Um, but rather than elevating one over the other, we're looking at them both kind of side by side today, because a central theme of this series and these videos is something that Williams defined for me as a present centeredness, which means that all of these things are kind of they're always going on. They're simultaneous, and our awareness of one or the other can change or shift, but they're always all there.
Right. What we could say is that an individual personality is how the four are structured together.
Mm-hmm.
So most of us, the majority of us, have one which is paramount, the one that we identify ourselves as. So I think, therefore I am, which is a very popular statement from way back when, would obviously be a head person. How do I feel about that would be a heart person. And as the head person moves through the world, trying to understand the world and take it in a meaningful, understandable way, the heart person moves through the world in terms of their feeling and their connectivity. Uh, as you mentioned before, both of those things are happening along with our sensory reality and the intuition. And they're constantly shifting and changing. So, if a head person gets in a situation where they're in an intense dialogue, their heart experience or their emotionality will probably open up. But kind of in terms of, you could call it our self-image, or that way that we define ourselves, most of us have that one aspect of ourselves that we identify mostly with.
So for me, one of the benefits of kind of this whole process and undertaking in the conversations and the exploration here is something that you've described to me about talking about, say, like owning my experience, say in terms of my emotionality or my thought process, rather than it just feeling like it just dropped on me. It was there and I wasn't aware of it, or I got into that intense dialogue, and for some reason I had a feeling that I don't know where it came from. That kind of thing. Instead of being just in a constant reaction to things that I'm not aware of, hopefully through this process, if I'm becoming more aware of all of the things that are going on all the time, there's two words you've used with me, owning the experience and embodying the experience.
Right. So what's happening is if I'm unconscious, if I haven't learned to own the experience, then I'm in reaction rather than response. And reaction is always automatic and it's always unconscious. Once I've started owning the experience, I both deepen and expand my reality where I don't go into that automatic response and automatic reaction, and I respond in terms of the environment, in terms of the reality going on, rather than some old experience that happened, with an ex-girlfriend or something, where I project that onto a present experience. So that's a big deal for us. And once I start owning my experience, I become more present-centered, which is another really important concept.
Full disclosure, William and myself, we would both describe ourselves as kind of head-oriented people, for better or worse. It is what it is. But one of the neat things about our friendship and the way that we met is because we also have had the benefit of the great gift of this just sort of intuitive response to music, which so many people share. But growing up as a kid, for me and also for you, some of the stories that you've told me, yeah, good for us that music was there to help us deepen in kind of the emotional realm.
Yeah.
What would you have to say about that?
I would say right on. Without music, I might very well have been living a very constricted, very sterile life, and music allowed me the world and my varied experience in life.
The kind of simultaneous awareness of the quadrants, the more we talk about it, what seems like it could have been a very obvious thing that's not obvious to me. Even living as a musician or as a teacher or as an academic or whatever, that the point that keeps coming back to me is that more deepening, more awareness of, say, like your emotionality through music brings richness to your life in whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
As I said, it was just very cool for us that as head-oriented people, that music was also there, and that our sensitivity toward it was intuitive. You mentioned that slippery concept of intuition, but somehow it's the intuition that's, I don't know, in a certain way is kind of circulating through the whole process.
Yeah. The mystery of life.
So I'd like you to say a little bit about how one way that this relates to the development of an individual, as a baby or a toddler, as they're growing up, kind of starting in the state where you described it as unbounded sensations, sleeping and crying and pooping and cooing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about how that comes along.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do a very simple explanation rather than getting into the real deep specifics, although, thousands of people have studied this whole process of developmental. There's a whole area of developmental psychology. But basically, we do start as these sensory beings who are uh, boundless in the world. We don't have the sense of boundary, which is a sense of self. So we move into the world as we grow. Uh, we also mature, kind of the natural maturation process. Our emotionality becomes more refined and deepens, and we gradually also become uh, we get a sense of self, of personhood, and it's like we're given a name, which is said to us enough times where we start to personally identify with that name. At the same time, we're starting to feel the boundaries of life.
And somewhere along in that process, or throughout that process, the intellect also. We've been looking for a word, and I couldn't find one that I really liked, but I don't know. Maybe what does the intellect sprout?
It takes different forms. When we're really young, you think about some of the belief system that we have of Santa Clauses and tooth fairies and things, where the intuitive is unbounded and can actually uh, manifest itself in a realistic mode as the ego or the self-image formulates. That oftentimes is pushed away. In my case, I can remember the time that was talking about Santa Claus to an older kid who started laughing at me and saying, there's no Santa Claus, that's silly kid stuff. And I can remember the hurt of that. And, and I had, as a result of that, I shut off some of that mystery.
One of my memorable personal experiences, or something that occurred a few times in my life, and we talked about how music has been a gift for us, and a channel into kind of an emotional deepening and expanding. But as someone who was always striving to be, you know, a thinking person, a thought directed person, there's a few times in my life when I somehow or another had sat down and made this conscious decision that I was too busy with other things that I was trying to do, and I quit music, put the instruments away or something like that. It's like I don't have time. And then every single time, after 3 months or 6 months or a year, I got this again. I guess you could only describe it as an intuitive sense that some part of my balance was off, that something was missing. And when I, get involved with music again, oh, duh, it would come back. So this is kind of like there were some instances in my life where I don't know, my self image, my socially constructed image, my purposeful image, my purposeful self, or whatever. Uh, instead of things being able to kind of peaceably coexist, there was jostling, and I'm trying to diminish some part of myself.
Right, which is something that we all do, and part of it has to do with the demands of the culture, and part of it has to do with trying to find an ideal balance internally. And sometimes the demand of the culture can take you totally out of what your natural sense would be. And, as a therapist, I've worked with many people who are in a whole reality, a whole job situation that they absolutely hate. And it's like, well, I really wanted to write poetry, I just didn't want to be an economist or whatever. And so, we have this relationship with our internal needs and with the outside world and the demands of them.
So this is one thing. Spoiler alert: this is the first of a series. I don't know if it's going to be 2, 3, or 20 videos, but never fear. If this only seems like the tip of the iceberg, that's because it's only the tip of the iceberg. But we had to kind of set like a bound and a time limit for ourselves today as we're kind of getting into it. So the last thing I want to sort of touch on is something that you describe as the container function. So what I want to wind up with today is some of the good news, some of the positive spin,
Right.
the fact or the reality that as maturing adults, we can still have some of that joy or experience that sense of wonder that you had or felt like you were losing when the Santa Claus myth, that door kind of got slammed in your face. But at the same time, um, we're not toddlers who scream uncontrollably when we're excited, or hit people in the sandbox because we don't like what's going on or whatever. Like the emotional realm, the emotional world, it's all still there for us to experience and embody, but we don't have to act it out. Talk a little bit about this container function.
Yeah, as we grow up, we naturally move through that either or of expression and repression. And the youngster, the very tiny person, only has those two possibilities. So I cry, or the parent says shush, and then I hold it back, and that's the only possibilities. As I get older, I learn how I can contain my feeling. So I can sit, and if Warren and I are having a conversation and we get to a place of argument, I can be angry. I don't have to either run out of the room or hit him upside the head. I can be with my anger, and I can either say, I'm feeling really pissed off right now, or I can just sit with it and be with it. So that's the containing function. And as far as those other feelings that we have from the past, we are whole human beings. We are total people, each of us. And we have the whole human repertoire. So no matter what experiences we've had and forgotten or repressed or whatever, they're all inside. And as we utilize our awareness, we can go inside and start reconnecting with maybe feelings that have been lost. A lot of people who have lived, very mediocre, very repressed lives can come back and start reconnecting with the excitement of their life. Because being alive is being excited. We may have learned how to turn it off, but we can't really turn it off. We can just disassociate from it, or deny it, or disconnect from it. So part of life streams has to do with starting to reconnect with totality.
And this is the perfect point to invite your responses, your observations, your comments, your questions. Open invitation. This is actually the purpose of why we're videotaping these conversations, because we have them all the time. But it's like, hey, why don't we make some videos and share them with people? Yeah, your own personal experiences, your take on this, things that acting out or repressing, or the feelings or episodes in your life when suddenly you become aware that some of this stuff is going on, or that that it's always been going on and you weren't aware of it, or anything thereof, or your objections to the whole notion and premise of this video. Whatever your response is, please leave some comments on the page and get in touch with us, because this is where the rubber meets the road, and we're only two people, and everyone else is not here with us right now, but we'd like you to be.